3 years have passed since the house on Forsyth Street last knew chaos. The jasmine Noah planted for his father now curls along the porch rail, its scent soft and forgiving, as though time could mask the past. Savannah still hums with its slow rhythm, church bells, river mist, and the rustle of oak leaves draped in Spanish moss. Peace, I've learned, isn't the absence of sorrow. It's the thin layer we lay over it, hoping it will hold. Noah turned 12 last week. He's grown tall for his age, all long limbs and curiosity, caught in that uncertain place between boy and adolescent. His laughter comes less often now, replaced by questions I sometimes can't answer. He spends his evenings in Michael's old study, sketching models of buildings from his imagination. When I pass by the door, I catch the echo of his father's habits, the same tilt of the head, the same soft hum when thinking. It's comforting and painful all at once. That night began quietly. Rain had started to fall, a soft rhythm against the kitchen windows. I was rinsing dishes while Noah worked on his laptop at the table. The glow from the screen painted his face blue-white. Then he went still. It was the kind of stillness that feels wrong in a living room, too sudden, too complete. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice trembled slightly. "Someone just emailed me." "From school?" He shook his head. "It's anonymous." He turned the screen toward me. On it was a single sentence, black letters on a white background. "Your father's death wasn't an accident." The subject line read only, "Truth sleeps beneath Forsyth." A chill moved through me like a current. I reached for the mouse. Probably a prank. Deleted. Noah didn't. His eyes widened. "There's a picture attached." I wanted to stop him, but my hand was too slow. He clicked. The image appeared grainy, faded but instantly recognizable. Michael, standing at a charity gala, smile mid-speech. Behind him, blurred in motion, Sloane leaning toward a man in a dark suit. The man's face was turned away, but the timestamp below the image was what froze my blood. 2:03 a.m. 10 minutes before the hospital called me. I forced my voice to sound calm. "People fake these things, Noah. Don't let them upset you. Why would anyone fake something like this?" His tone carried that fragile mix of fear and defiance only children have. "Grandma, what if it's true?" I hesitated. "Then it's still not for you to carry." He looked at me, eyes too, knowing for 12. "But it's about Dad. It's ours to carry." That night, after he went to bed, I printed the email and locked it in my desk drawer. My hands shook the whole time. I told myself it was absurd, an internet hoax. But beneath reason lay the old dread that never truly left. Michael's final letter, his warnings, the brass key. "If you're reading this, the worst has happened. Trust Victor. Protect Noah." I sat by the window and watched lightning crawl across the clouds. The air was thick with summer rain, the city's lights muted behind the storm. Somewhere, a church bell tolled midnight. I remembered the doctor's voice from that night, calm, clinical. Massive aneurysm. Nothing could have been done. But Michael had always been healthy. Strong, sharp, too young. And he'd been afraid, those last months. I had seen it in his eyes. The next morning, Noah was quiet. He skipped breakfast, saying he had homework. I let him be. At that age, grief moves in secret channels, half memory, half imagination. By afternoon, I called Marla Gaines. She'd retired from the Savannah police but still worked private cases. She was the only one I trusted after Victor's death. When I explained about the email, she went silent for a moment. Then, "Forward it to me. I'll see what I can find. But Helena, don't reply to it. Do you think it's real? I think someone wants you to believe it is. That's dangerous either way." That night, the air felt heavier. I checked the locks twice. The jasmine outside swayed in the wind, its petals scattering like pale ghosts across the porch. At 1:30 a.m., I woke to a faint light under Noah's door. I knocked softly. He startled when I opened it. "Noah," I whispered, "why aren't you asleep?" He closed his laptop too quickly. "I couldn't. I keep thinking about the email." My heart sank. "Honey, please let it go." He hesitated, biting his lip. "I just asked them one question." My stomach turned cold. "You replied?" He nodded, barely audible. I wrote, "Who are you?" I wanted to scold him, to make him understand how dangerous curiosity could be. But the words caught in my throat. I saw in him not a child defying me, but a boy desperate for connection with the father he'd lost, with answers I'd never given. I said nothing. When he finally fell asleep, I sat at his desk. The laptop was still warm. His sent message glowed on the screen, 2 words suspended in silence. "Who are you?" I closed the lid and stared out the window. The storm had passed. The night hung still and damp, the kind of stillness that listens. At dawn, sunlight crept through the blinds. I went to wake Noah for breakfast. His laptop blinked with a new message received at 3:17 a.m. The subject line read, "Ask your neighbor about Harbor Crest." There was no text, only an image. The brass key, number 127, etched into its side. The same key Michael had left me 3 years ago. Savannah always smells of magnolia after the rain. That morning, the world felt rinsed clean, the sky washed to a pale blue sheen. But peace in this city is fragile, like glass stretched too thin. I found Noah on the porch steps, still in his pajamas, the laptop open beside him. The jasmine vines trembled in a breeze that carried both warmth and warning. He looked up as I came outside. "There's nothing new," he said quietly. I pretended not to know what he meant. "Breakfast is getting cold." He gave a small nod, closing the laptop, but not before I caught a glimpse of his inbox. The email from the night before still glowed bold and unread. "Ask your neighbor about Harbor Crest." Our only neighbors within shouting distance were the Whitlows across the street and the old Renshaw house next door, which had stood empty since before Michael's death. Or so I thought. By late afternoon, a moving truck pulled up to the Renshaw property. 2 men unloaded furniture, modern, sterile, expensive. I watched from the kitchen window as a third man stepped out of a sleek black sedan. Tall, early 40s, immaculately dressed. He paused beneath the oak canopy, eyes lifted toward our house. Our gazes met, though he couldn't possibly have known I was watching through the lace curtains. Yet somehow, I felt seen. Noah appeared beside me, barefoot, curious. "Someone moved in?" I nodded slowly. "Apparently." He squinted through the window. "He looks important." "Important doesn't always mean good," I murmured. That evening, I baked cornbread, a peace offering, or perhaps a reconnaissance mission. Noah carried the basket while I rang the bell next door. The man who opened the door smiled with practiced warmth. "Well, that's neighborly of you. I'm Adrian Royce." The name hit me like a jolt of static. "Royce?" I repeated, forcing composure. "Any relation to a Damon Royce?" His brows lifted slightly, polite confusion or perfect disguise I couldn't tell. "It's a common enough name, I suppose." "No, I don't believe I know any Damon." He extended his hand. "And you are?" "Helena Carver. This is my grandson, Noah." "Ah," he said softly, as if the name stirred something faintly familiar. "The Carver house. I've admired it for years. Beautiful architecture." His voice was smooth, too smooth. Every word measured like a therapist soothing a patient. I caught a faint trace of cologne, subtle but calculated, the kind that whispers money. "Please come in," he said. The Renshaw home had been gutted and reborn: white walls, chrome fixtures, shelves lined with psychology texts, and modern art. The space felt impersonal, like a stage set awaiting its first scene. "I'm a forensic psychologist," he explained when Noah asked about the books. "I consult on criminal cases, mostly trauma assessment." Noah's eyes lit up. "That's like helping people who've been hurt, right?" Adrian smiled. "Exactly." His gaze lingered on Noah, a beat too long before shifting to me. "You must be very proud of him." "I am." When we left, he walked us to the gate. "It's nice to have neighbors again. This street feels like the kind of place where people still look out for one another." "Some of us try," I replied. That night, I couldn't sleep. The name Royce pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat. The coincidence was too precise, too cruel to be random. Yet when I searched public records, Adrian's file was pristine: degrees from Emory, government contracts, glowing references. Still, something in his eyes unsettled me. They were kind, yes, but the kind of kindness that studies you before deciding which mask to wear. The following days slipped into routine, at least on the surface. Noah started summer art classes at the Savannah Institute. He came home each afternoon full of energy, sketches spilling from his backpack. But slowly, I began to notice small changes. He spoke of Adrian, often how the doctor had waved from his porch, how he'd shown him a telescope for stargazing. He said he could help me with my presentation, Noah said one evening. He knows a lot about architecture. His brother worked in construction or something. My chest tightened. His brother. Did he say his brother's name? I asked lightly. No? Why? No reason, darling. Just curious. The next day, I visited Judge Whitlow across the street. His years on the bench had sharpened his instincts. After I told him about Adrian, his expression darkened. Royce? That's not a name I'd ignore, Helena. Damon Royce was on every whisper list Victor ever investigated before he died. Do you think they're related? Too early to say. But if he's in Savannah, he's not here by accident. When I returned home, Noah was in the garden with Adrian, laughing as they tested the telescope. The late sun washed them in gold, and for a fleeting moment, they looked almost like father and son. Adrian caught my eye over Noah's shoulder and smiled a small, knowing curve of the lips. Later that week, Marla called. I traced the anonymous email, she said. The server routes through 3 VPNs, classic laundering. But the final IP before the cloak? Savannah, Georgia. Specifically, a residential block near Forsyth Park. My pulse quickened. Our block? Close enough to make me nervous. Can you narrow it down? Working on it. But Helena, who's moved in next to you lately? I didn't answer. After we hung up, I stared out the window. The Renshaw house was dark except for a single upstairs light. A figure crossed in front of it, tall, deliberate. The jasmine rustled against the glass, as if whispering a warning. Days turned into a week. I kept polite distance, though Noah's visits next door became frequent. He's helping me with my model, Noah explained. He even showed me blueprints of real crime scene houses. Isn't that cool? I smiled faintly. Fascinating, I said, while inside my stomach knotted. That evening, as Noah showered, I walked across the narrow strip of lawn separating our houses. The air was damp with honeysuckle and something metallic. Adrian answered the door, still in his shirt sleeves. Helena, what a pleasant surprise. Sorry to intrude. I wanted to thank you for being kind to Noah. He stepped aside. He's a remarkable boy. Reminds me of someone I knew. I met his gaze. Your brother, perhaps? Something flickered behind his expression, gone in an instant. You've been reading too many mystery novels, he said lightly. I smiled thinly. Perhaps, but I've learned that coincidences are rarely innocent. He studied me then not as a neighbor, but as a psychologist dissecting a subject. You've lost much, Mrs. Carver. Loss distorts perception. Sometimes we see ghosts where there are only reflections. Maybe, I said softly. But reflections still come from something real. When I returned home, Noah was asleep on the couch, a half-finished drawing beside him. It was our 2 houses, ours shaded in warm tones, Adrian's in stark gray lines. Between them, a thin bridge. At midnight, I woke to a sound. A faint voice carried through the open window, distorted by distance. I rose, pulling my robe tighter, and stepped out onto the porch. Across the yard, in the upstairs window of the Renshaw house, Adrian stood backlit by the pale glow of a desk lamp, phone pressed to his ear. The night air was thick enough to hold his words. Yes, I found them. Then, as if sensing my presence, he turned toward the window. Our eyes met through the glass, 2 figures framed by darkness and the echo of something neither of us would name. And in that stillness I knew. The peace of Forsyth Street had ended. The morning after that call, I brewed coffee strong enough to cut through fear. The house was quiet, too quiet. Noah had left early for art class, and the silence clung to the walls like humidity. I tried to convince myself I'd misheard Adrian, that the words were imagination shaped by unease. But imagination had never been my weakness. Perception was. At 9 o'clock, Marla called. Helena, she said, you'd better sit down. I did. Victor Lane's old law office was broken into last night. His assistant found the door pried open, safes emptied. Nothing else was taken, no money, no electronics, just one folder. My heart began to race. Which folder? The one labeled Carver, Michael. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I could hear the rain tapping against the window panes, slow and relentless. Was there any sign who did it? Cameras were wiped, Marla said. Whoever did this knew what they were after, and they knew where to find it. I gripped the phone. You think this has to do with that email? I think it's all one thing, she replied. Someone is retracing Michael's steps. After we hung up, I sat at the table staring at the mug cooling between my palms. The edges of my world had started to blur again the same way they had after Michael died. This time, though, there was no fog of grief to dull the fear. There was only clarity. That evening, Noah returned home flushed from the summer heat, a sketch roll slung over his shoulder. "Grandma," he said breathlessly, "you should have seen it. Adrian showed me how perspective works, like how buildings can look taller if you shift the vanishing point." I smiled, but it felt like holding glass in my mouth. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You and Dr. Royce are spending quite a lot of time together." He nodded. "He's helping me with my model for the exhibition next month. He said he might even take me to the courthouse to show me where he consults sometimes." I forced a casual tone. "The courthouse?" "Yeah, he said he works with detectives on old cases." The blood drained from my face. "Noah, I'd prefer you didn't go anywhere without telling me first. Promise me that." He sighed, exasperated in that way only 12-year-olds can be. "I'm not a baby, Grandma." "No," I said softly. "You're not, but you're still my responsibility." He looked away, mumbling, "You worry too much." "I've earned that right." That night I couldn't sleep. I poured myself a small brandy and sat in Michael's old study, now half Noah's art room, half museum of memory. The faint scent of cedar lingered in the wood. I opened the drawer where I kept the printed copy of the anonymous email. The edges were curling, the ink beginning to fade. "Ask your neighbor about Harborcrest." Harborcrest Capital, the name had haunted me ever since Victor first whispered it after Michael's funeral. "Your son stumbled on something big," he'd said then. "Money laundering, land deals, maybe political." I hadn't wanted to know more. Now, apparently, I had no choice. I pulled out my phone and searched Harborcrest Capital Savannah. The first result was a list of Shell subsidiaries: Harborcrest Urban Works, Harborcrest Maritime Development, and, buried among them, Royce Urban Works, LLC. I sat back, my pulse hammering. Royce. The screen dimmed, reflecting my own face, a mixture of fear and vindication. The next morning, I visited Victor's office myself. The police tape fluttered loosely across the door, a symbolic warning more than a barrier. Inside, the air smelled of dust and paper. The filing cabinet where Michael's folder had been was indeed open, its lock snapped clean. Marla met me there, her badge clipped to her belt. She carried a folder of her own photographs, notes, copies of the old Harborcrest investigation Victor had started before his death. "Look at this," she said, laying out a printout. It was a diagram, lines connecting shell companies like a spiderweb. At the center, circled in red, the word Royce. "Damon Royce," Marla explained, frontman for Harborcrest's real estate division, went off the grid after Michael's death. But now, look here. She pointed to a recent date. 3 weeks ago, a new entity was registered, Royce Consulting Group. Guess who signed the registration? I already knew. Adrian Royce. Marla nodded grimly. Same Savannah address, same neighborhood. The room seemed to tilt. "So it's not a coincidence." "No," she said. "He's either Damon's brother or his proxy. Either way, he's here for a reason." I steadied myself against the desk. What reason? To finish what Damon started. That night, as thunder rolled in from the coast, I waited for Adrian to make his move or reveal himself. But the Renshaw house stayed dark. Noah, oblivious to the tension, worked on his project in the living room, building miniature walls from cardboard and glue. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, struck by how much he looked like Michael at that age. The same concentration, the same quiet diligence. I wanted to protect that innocence, even as the world conspired to strip it away. At 10 p.m., I heard him climb the stairs. "Good night, Grandma," he called softly. "Good night, darling." When the house settled, I poured another cup of coffee and sat in the dark, waiting for a sign, any sign that my instincts weren't betraying me. It came just before midnight. A light flickered in Adrian's upstairs study, then went dark again. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a new message from Marla. Found something in the city property records. Michael was investigating zoning fraud tied to Royce Urban Works before his death. The folder that disappeared had copies of those contracts. Be careful. The message ended there. I stared at it until the words blurred. The next morning, Savannah woke under a sky the color of pewter. The jasmine vines dripped with dew, their sweetness turned sour. Noah left early again for his class. I lingered at the table, listening to the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Then, unable to bear the stillness, I decided to tidy his room, an old habit from when he was small. At first, everything was ordinary. Books stacked neatly, art supplies scattered across the desk. Then, as I bent to pick up a fallen sheet of paper, something glinted beneath the bed. I reached for it. A cufflink, gold, heavy, engraved with ornate initials, A.R. Adrian Royce. For a long time, I simply stared at it in my palm. The edges were warm from the heat of my skin, the metal slick with the faintest trace of oil, as if it had been handled recently. I imagined the scene. Adrian leaning close to Noah, adjusting his collar, the cufflink slipping free, unnoticed. Or worse, left behind deliberately as a message. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the cufflink gleaming like a small, terrible truth. Through the window, I could see the Renshaw house next door, its windows shuttered, its walls smooth and silent as a mask. I whispered to the empty room, "Michael, what did you uncover? And how far will they go to bury it again?" The jasmine trembled outside, as though something unseen had just brushed past. Morning light has a strange mercy. It paints everything in forgiveness, even fear. But that mercy never lasts. When I woke, the cufflink still lay on my nightstand, catching a blade of sunlight like a small coin of guilt. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. Objects, I've learned, hold temperature longer than emotion, they cool slower than the heart. I dressed, brewed coffee, and tried to pretend the world was ordinary. Noah's laughter from the porch helped. He was showing our mail carrier his newest sketch. His joy was proof that innocence could still survive beneath the same roof as dread. Then the mailman handed me a thin envelope addressed only to resident. No return name. Postmarked from New York. Inside were 3 photographs printed on matte paper, all grainy, taken from surveillance distance. A woman stepping from a taxi in Manhattan. The same woman entering a glass-walled high-rise. A close-up of her turning her head, sunglasses slipping just enough to reveal her face. Sloane. Alive. Older, thinner, hair cropped short and silver at the ends but unmistakable. I stared until the edges of the photos curled in my hands. The last I'd heard, Damon had killed her in Bali. Victor had even shown me the report, a burned passport, a partial body, unidentifiable. Yet here she was, resurrected amid New York glass and steel. I hid the envelope in my desk and called Marla. "You'd better come by," I said. "I have something you need to see." She arrived within the hour, trench coat still damp from Savannah's sudden drizzle. Her eyes scanned the photographs, jaw tightening. "Could be a doppelganger," she offered without conviction. "Or it's her, and if it's her, she's in deep cover. Why send these to me?" "To rattle you," she said simply. "Whoever's pulling these strings wants you off balance. You, not me, not the police you, because you're close to Noah." The sound of his name pierced me like a pin through silk. "You think he's in danger?" "I think Michael died trying to shield him," Marla said. "And someone out there hasn't finished what they started." That night, the phone rang once, then twice, then silence. No voicemail, no number. I unplugged it, heart hammering, then laughed at myself. "You're letting ghosts live rent-free," I muttered. But ghosts pay an attention. And attention is a kind of currency, too. At dinner, Noah talked about his model project. "Adrian says perspective is about trust," he said. "If the viewer doesn't trust the lines, the whole image falls apart." I almost dropped my fork. "He said that?" "Yeah. Isn't it true?" "Maybe," I said softly. "But sometimes the lines lie, Noah." He frowned, puzzled. I smiled to end the conversation, but the words echoed inside me long after he'd gone upstairs. Near midnight, thunder rolled in from the river. I sat at my desk, rereading Michael's letter for the 100th time. Document everything. Trust Victor. Protect Noah. The ink had faded slightly where my tears had once fallen. Outside, the rain began again, heavy and deliberate, as though the sky itself were erasing evidence. Then the house phone rang. 1 ring, 2, 3. I let it reach the answering machine. Static hissed, then a faint breathing filled the line. A woman's breath, soft, shaky. Then a whisper. You took what was mine. I froze. The line clicked dead. I replayed it 3 times. Same breath, same accusation. It was Sloane's voice or a perfect mimicry of it. I tried to call Marla, but the storm had knocked out half the circuits. The phone emitted only a dull hum. My cell had no signal. Savannah has a way of closing in when it wants to keep its secrets. At dawn, the rain eased. The streets shone like mirrors. I walked next door under a pretense Noah's forgotten sketchbook to see if Adrian's car was gone. It wasn't. He stood on the porch, sleeves rolled, trimming jasmine vines that had crept over the fence. "Morning, Helena," he greeted, voice bright, almost cheerful. "Storm keep you up?" "Most of it," I said. "Seems our neighborhood attracts drama." He smiled. "Ah, but drama keeps the blood warm." Then, noticing my glance toward his car, "Planning another outing today, some old records downtown." "For work?" "Always," he said, clipping a vine clean. "You'd be surprised what history hides beneath official paper." Our eyes met. I thought of the envelope from New York, of Harbor Crest, of the missing folder. My tongue felt heavy with unsaid questions. Before I could speak, he gestured toward Noah's yard. "Your grandson's quite talented. He has his father's eye for design." "You knew my son?" "A beat. Only through reputation. Savannah's a small city for ambitious men." Something flickered behind his calm recognition, maybe pity. Then he turned away, as if granting me dismissal. When I returned home, the phone was ringing again. "Mrs. Carver?" a male voice said when I answered. "This is the manager at Street Brigid Medical Center. We had an unusual call logged under your number last night." My stomach clenched. "What kind of call?" "A man phoned requesting access to the autopsy report for Michael Carver. He said he was your attorney, Mr. Victor Lane." My grip tightened. "That's impossible. Mr. Lane died months ago." A pause. "I see," the manager said carefully. "Well, whoever it was, knew Mr. Lane's license number, down to the last digit." When I hung up, my hands were trembling too hard to dial Marla again. Outside, thunder rumbled once more, though the sky was clear. That evening, I went through Victor's remaining papers, what little the thieves had spared. Among them was an index card in his handwriting. Harborcrest Urban Works, Royce. Beneath it, 2 initials. S.A. Sloane Avery. My pulse quickened. The puzzle pieces were beginning to arrange themselves, though I couldn't yet see the picture. I heard footsteps upstairs, Noah getting ready for bed. The familiar rhythm comforted me. Then a faint rustle came from the front porch. I moved quietly to the window. An envelope lay against the door, slick with evening dew. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bearing one typed line. "He's already watching the boy." No signature, no address. I looked across the lawn. The Renshaw house windows were dark except for one Adrian's study where a single lamp burned. Sleep was useless that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, the old revolver my late husband once kept for burglars resting beside my tea. Hours passed. Rain returned, tapping a slow Morse code on the roof. At 2:14 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, I answered. At first, only static. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years, steady, warm, unmistakable. "Mom, they know." The line cut to silence. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, heartbeat roaring louder than the rain. The machine clicked off, a faint tone, then nothing. But as I set the phone down, a thought surfaced cold and precise. The hospital had said Michael died instantly. No time for calls, no last words. Yet here was his voice, recorded, deliberate. Someone had kept it, fed it back to me like bait. The jasmine outside shuddered in the wind, scattering petals against the window like white ash. The house smelled suddenly of salt and static. I whispered to the dark, "If this is the game you want, I've played it before." But the dark gave no answer, only the faint echo of my son's voice repeating in my head, "They know." Morning arrived gray and swollen with humidity. The phone on the kitchen wall hung silent, though I kept glancing at it as if the silence itself were dangerous. Noah ate his cereal without looking up. Neither of us mentioned the storm, the calls, or the voice that wasn't supposed to exist. When he left for school, I locked the door behind him and finally allowed my hands to shake. 3 years of pretending peace had left me out of practice for fear. I dialed Marla. "I have new evidence," I said. Her reply came crisp. Then I'll bring coffee. And gloves. She arrived 30 minutes later, trench coat half drenched from the drizzle, a paper bag of beignets in one hand. I laid the photographs of Sloane, the typed note, and the hospital manager's message on the table. Marla studied them one by one. "They're tightening the circle," she murmured. "Whoever's orchestrating this has access to official records, autopsy files, attorney IDs. That's institutional." She sipped her coffee, eyes narrowing. Michael knew something that frightened people in suits, not gangsters with guns. "Harborcrest," I said. The name tasted metallic. She nodded. "I've pulled fragments from old court dockets. Land deals, fake charities, kickbacks. Victor's stolen file would have proven it." Then she looked up. "Anything Michael might have kept at home?" I thought of the journals, his leather-bound notebook stacked in the attic trunk. He'd written nightly, meticulous as a monk. After his death, I couldn't bear to open them. They smelled too much like him. We climbed the narrow stairs, dust swirling in the beam of Marla's flashlight. I opened the trunk, the hinges sighing. Inside lay the journals, each labeled by year. The final 1-year 10 ended 3 months before his death. Its last pages were filled with tight, angular script, and near the bottom, a series of numbers written twice, then scratched out. 347 191 142. Beside them, a single word underlined twice. Harbor. Coordinates? Marla asked. No. Michael loved puzzles. I remembered how he used to hide birthday gifts with ciphered clues. He always used substitution A equals 1, B equals 2. I took a pen, converting the numbers into letters C, G, S, K, P. Nonsense, until I noticed faint dots above each digit, 5 in all. Dotted letters. Morse code, maybe? Marla photographed the page. "Let me run it through a pattern search." While she worked, I turned another page and found an envelope taped to the inside cover. My name written in Michael's neat hand. Inside was a single sentence. "If you must look, begin where the tide hides its secrets." I stared at the words until their meaning shifted. Literal tide? The river? Or the bank Michael called Harborcrest? I remembered the brass key. Box 127. Harbor Federal. Marla exhaled sharply. "Helena, those numbers? They match part of an IBAN code, an offshore account prefix. Cayman Islands." I felt the room tilt. "You're saying he hid money?" "Not money," she said. "Evidence." That night, I searched Michael's study until the smell of old paper filled the air. Receipts, ledgers, client files, each detail of his careful life. At the back of a drawer lay a small flash drive wrapped in electrician's tape. I plugged it into the laptop with hands that wouldn't steady. A folder appeared. Harborcrest divided by personal. Inside were scanned documents, contracts, shell company rosters, and one PDF titled Trust Amendment PDF. It was a notarized document. Michael's signature, dated 3 months before his death. The amendment transferred custodial and fiduciary oversight of the Carver Family Educational Trust to Helena Carver, guardian of minor Noah Carver. He'd changed the trustee. Me. A note in the margin, in his handwriting. "She'll try to take it. Don't let her. The account is not for her. It's for him." Underneath, a string of digits, the same code from the journal. My throat closed. "Marla," I whispered into the phone. "I think I just found his hidden will." She arrived within minutes, still in her pajamas, hair tied back. We scrolled through the files together, hearts beating in sync with the fan's slow whir. She pointed at a ledger of transactions. "Look here, after his supposed aneurysm, money moved from this offshore trust into an account under SA Holdings. Guess who owns that shell company?" "Sloane Avery," I said. "She accessed it after he died," Marla confirmed. "And the signatures were witnessed by a Dr. Adrian Royce." My vision blurred. So Adrian was there from the start. Marla leaned back. "He's the bridge between Sloane and Damon. She uses his credentials to move funds. He uses her access to bury trails." Classic cover. Lightning cracked outside. The lights flickered. Marla disconnected the drive. "We need to make copies, keep them separate. If they realize we have this..." Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowning. "That's odd. Unknown number." "Don't," I said, but she'd already answered. "Detective Gaines," she said into the receiver. Silence. Then her face went pale. "Who is this?" I could hear it faintly, the same distorted breathing that had filled my line days before, followed by a whisper. "Stop digging! The boy is already marked." Marla hung up, knuckles white. "They know we found the files." After she left, I checked on Noah. He was asleep, mouth slightly open, a pencil still in hand. His sketchbook lay beside him, open to a drawing of the riverfront, a building half real, half imagined, rising above dark water. Across the top he'd written, "Where the tide hides its secrets." I sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his hair. "Oh, Michael," I whispered, "you left us a map, but not the key to survive it." Downstairs, thunder rolled again. I copied the files to a flash drive and hid it inside an old tea tin, then placed it in the pantry behind the flour jar. The simple act of concealment gave me a fleeting sense of control. The next morning, sunlight filtered through wet leaves, deceptively gentle. Noah bounded into the kitchen, excitement replacing the shadows of the last week. "Grandma, Adrian's taking me to the museum today. He says there's an exhibit on urban design." My spoon froze mid-air. "He invited you?" "He got permission from my teacher. It's part of the summer program. He shouldn't make plans without talking to me." "He did," Noah said. "He called last night. You were asleep." I hadn't been. I'd been hiding evidence while my grandson's future walked next door. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "I'll drive you instead. We can meet him there." He shrugged, unconcerned. "Sure," he said to meet at 10. At 9:45 we arrived at the museum steps. Crowds gathered for the new architecture exhibit. Adrian was nowhere in sight. I called his phone voicemail. We waited 15 minutes before Noah tugged my sleeve. "Maybe he's late?" Another 10 passed. Then a text lit my screen from an unknown number. "Thank you for bringing him. You saved me the trouble." I scanned the crowd, heart hammering. Noah gripped my hand. "Grandma, what's wrong?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Nothing, darling. We're going home." That night, I emailed the encrypted documents to Marla's secure drive. Then I opened Noah's laptop to check his school project files, habit now more than curiosity. A new message blinked in his inbox, time-stamped 3:07 a.m. No sender name, no subject line, only an attachment. An image of the brass key, number 127, resting on what looked like polished marble. Beneath it, a single sentence, "You're closer than he ever was." I stared until the screen dimmed, the reflection of my own face swimming in the dark glass, older, harder, resolute. "Then come for me," I whispered, "but not for him." I used to believe evil arrived loudly, sirens, shouts, the kind of noise you can prepare for. Now I know it prefers quiet. It waits for the moment you exhale and think you're safe. 2 days after the key image appeared, Marla was supposed to meet me at the courthouse cafe. She never arrived. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, a voice I did Captain Reed from the Savannah PD. "Mrs. Carver? There's been an accident. Detective Gaines was involved in a single-vehicle collision off Bay Street." The words blurred. "Is she alive?" "Critical. We're transferring her to St. Bridget now." The same hospital that had called me about Michael. I drove there half-blind with panic, the wipers thrashing against drizzle. In the ICU, I found her behind a wall of machines, face bruised, hair matted with blood. The nurse said she'd lost control on a straight road, no skid marks, no brake lights, just impact. But Marla was the most cautious driver I knew. I sat beside her, clutching the cold rail. "You can't leave me too," I whispered. "Not when we're this close." Her fingers twitched once tiny, deliberate, and pointed toward her coat on the chair. Inside the pocket was her phone. The screen cracked, but one unsent text still glowed. It wasn't over. "It's all connected to Harbor Crest." Then the monitor beeped a warning, and nurses filled the room. They asked me to step outside. I never saw her open her eyes again. The next day's paper called it a tragic traffic incident. No mention of sabotage, no mention of Harbor Crest. At the funeral, I stood alone beneath an umbrella while rain seeped into the red clay. Savannah Earth never lets go of water or secrets. Adrian attended too, uninvited, offering condolences with perfect gravity. "She spoke highly of you," he said softly. "A woman of integrity. How considerate of you to notice," I replied. He tilted his head. "We all lose people we depend on, Helena. The question is whether we let grief turn into obsession." I met his gaze. Obsession built the truth that grief destroys. For the first time, he smiled without warmth. Careful, or you'll start sounding like your son. That night I searched Marla's phone. Its backup drive auto-synced before the crash. The files loaded slowly, one after another. Photos of Michael's journals, notes about Harborcrest's zoning fraud, a voice memo recorded just hours before the accident. Her voice was steady but urgent. Helena, I found the toxicology report from Michael's autopsy. The aneurysm wasn't spontaneous. There were traces of succinylcholine, a paralytic, administered intravenously. Whoever injected him knew exactly what they were doing. The memo ended mid-sentence. A burst of static tires screeching, a gasp, then silence. My hands went numb. They killed him. I called the hospital to confirm. The coroner on duty said the sample had been misplaced years ago. Lost during relocation, he claimed. Lost. The same word they'd used for Victor's files, for justice, for everything that mattered. I spent the next day tracing Harborcrest's holdings. Every path led back to Royce Urban Works. Adrian's company. Bedusk I had made in my decision. I wasn't going to wait for another polite threat in my mailbox. At 9 p.m., I walked next door. The jasmine between our porches glistened with dew. Adrian opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been expecting me. Helena, he said warmly, you look exhausted. Come in, please. The house smelled faintly of cedar and antiseptic clinical, controlled. A single lamp burned beside a stack of files on his desk. I wanted to thank you, I began. For being so kind to Noah, he smiled. He's a remarkable boy, very much his mother's son. The words hit like ice water. His mother's? He shrugged. Sloane had formidable genes. Ambition like that leaves traces. I stepped closer. You knew her. A pause. Then, a small nod. The truth revealed like a magician's coin. Years ago, Damon introduced us. She was persuasive. Where is she now? He smiled. You of all people should know that the dead rarely stay buried. My pulse thundered. She called me. She's alive. He studied me with clinical fascination. And what did she say? That I took what was hers. Then perhaps she's telling the truth. He moved closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. Your son rewrote his will 3 months before he died. Did he tell you why? He wanted to protect Noah. Adrian shook his head slowly. He wanted to protect you. From what he discovered and from whom? Whom? Ask the mirror, he said. You may not like the reflection. Before I could answer, Noah's voice called from our porch next door, faint but clear. Grandma? Adrian's smile widened. You should go to him. Children wake from nightmares easily at that age. The implication froze my blood. At that age. I turned and fled the house, heart hammering, half expecting him to follow. He didn't. The door clicked shut behind me like a cell closing. Noah was standing at his window, pale in the lamplight. I saw someone in the yard, he whispered. He was looking at my window. Probably a shadow, sweetheart. I'm not lying. His small hands trembled. He was wearing gloves. I pulled him close. You're safe. You're here with me. But even as I said it, I glanced toward the jasmine hedge and caught the glint of something metallic wedged between the vines. I stepped outside, barefoot, and retrieved it. Assuring Keb, the same brand listed in the autopsy report Marla had found. I felt the world tilt, the night narrowing to a single terrible point of focus. They weren't done. The next morning, I drove to the police station with the evidence sealed in a plastic bag. The officer on duty glanced at it, unimpressed. We'll log it, ma'am. I demanded to see a detective. None were available. The city, it seemed, was always short on justice. I left the syringe cap anyway, knowing it would vanish into paperwork before noon. When I returned home, Noah was in the yard building a tower from river stones, humming to himself. For a moment the sight steadied me. Then I noticed his drawing lying nearby another of his architectural sketches. Only this one showed 2 houses side by side, joined by a single underground corridor labeled Escape Tunnel. Noah, I asked gently, who told you about this? He looked up, eyes wide. Adrian. He said every old Savannah house has one, in case of floods. Did he show you? No, Noah said, frowning. He just said we'd explore it someday. I gathered the paper carefully, hiding my shaking hands. Maybe not, sweetheart. Some tunnels are best left closed. That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the lights. Every creak in the floorboard sounded deliberate. At 2 a.m., a car engine idled somewhere down the street, then faded. The jasmine rustled once and stilled. When I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, a faint knock woke me. 3 slow taps at the front door. I reached for the revolver. Another knock. Through the peephole, no one stood there, only a small brown envelope resting on the mat. Inside was a single Polaroid. Marla's car, crushed against a barrier, smoke still rising. On the back, one line written in neat block letters, "You were warned." And beneath it, a fingerprint in dark red smudge blood, or ink. I couldn't tell. I sat down on the cold floor, envelope shaking in my hands. For the first time in years, I felt the edge of tears I couldn't hold back. Then I saw movement through the window, a light flickering in Adrian's upstairs study. He was standing at the window, phone to his ear, the same silhouette as the night I first heard him whisper. He turned slightly, and in that moment, the lamp illuminated his forearm. A thin scar ran along the vein precisely where an IV would go to practice injections. He raised his glass toward me in silent toast, then closed the curtain. Morning broke too cleanly, as if the world meant to wash itself of the night before. I brewed coffee, strong enough to burn, but it couldn't dissolve the image of Adrian's raised glass or that thin scar on his arm. By the time Noah padded downstairs, the house already smelled of nerves. He looked at me, sensing it. "You didn't sleep again." I forced a smile. Neither did the birds. He poured cereal, crunching loudly, pretending we were normal. Then, almost shyly, "Adrian said he could show me the old cellars under his house. There used to be storage tunnels," he said. "Could I?" "No." It came out sharper than I meant. He flinched. "It's just history, Grandma. It's trespassing into trouble." He pushed the bowl away. "You hate him for no reason." I opened my mouth, then shut it. I couldn't tell a 12-year-old that the man next door might have killed his father. I spent the day searching through Marla's encrypted backup, the one she'd synced before the crash. Among the dozens of files was a folder named Seraph Lab. Inside chemical inventories, lab photos, and a procurement order stamped with a familiar signature. Dr. Adrian Royce, Principal Investigator. The same hospital where Michael had died, St. Bridget was listed as the trial partner. The experimental compound, succinylcholine chloride, paralytic agent, study withdrawn after fatal reaction in one test subject. My stomach turned cold. Michael hadn't been a patient. He'd been a target. Someone inside the hospital had used Adrian's research supply to stage an aneurysm. I printed the order sheet, circled the date 1 week before Michael's death, and slid it into my journal. Then I saw the email thread below it. From Appoint. Royce@seraph-lab.com to s.avery@harborcrest.invest. Subject. Final dosage approved. Ensure no trace. Proof. Cold, clinical, undeniable. At dusk, I sat on the porch, the paper trembling in my hands. Noah rode his bike up and down the lane, his laughter sharp against the cicadas. For a moment I wanted to tear the pages up, pretend none of it existed. But truth doesn't vanish when ignored, it festers. Adrian appeared at his gate, waving. "Evening ride, Noah? You'll outgrow that bike soon?" Noah grinned, looping a final circle before stopping beside him. "Grandma says I can't go into the cellar." Adrian chuckled. "She's a wise woman, but wisdom can't hide the truth forever." His eyes flicked to me, deliberate. I walked to the fence. "If you have something to say, Doctor, say it to me." He rested an elbow on the gatepost. "You've been busy digging into things best left buried. You poisoned my son." A faint smile. "Accusations are ugly without evidence. I have your emails, your lab orders." His expression didn't change, but the pause after was heavy. "Then you know how dangerous knowledge can be." He turned away, his voice almost gentle. "Take care, Helena. The city has soft soil. Graves sink easily." That night, I double-bolted every door. Around midnight, I woke to footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. The boards creaked once, then silence. I waited, revolver ready. Nothing. Only the jasmine swaying in a wind that hadn't existed a moment earlier. At dawn, the back gate stood open. Noah's bike was gone. I called his school. He'd never arrived. Panic clawed through me. I phoned every friend, every neighbor. No one had seen him since yesterday evening. Then, a message appeared on my phone, no number, just a single line of text. "He's safe, don't call the police." Attached was a photo. Noah in what looked like an old brick cellar, sitting on a stool, pale but unharmed. Behind him, a rusted pipe and a ladder disappearing upward. In his lap lay the sketchbook he carried everywhere. My knees buckled. The cellar, the tunnels. I ran next door. The Renshaw house door stood ajar. The interior smelled of damp stone. I shouted his name. My voice came back hollow. The study was empty, the files gone, dust rings where they had been. In the kitchen, a trap door stood open, light spilling up from below. A narrow stair descended into shadow. I forced myself down, one hand gripping the revolver, the other the wall. The air was cool, metallic, thick with mildew. At the bottom, another corridor, half flooded, running toward the river, and on the wall, scrawled in black marker, "Trust the map." Pinned beneath the words was a torn page from Noah's sketchbook, the drawing of the two houses joined by a tunnel. I followed the passage by flashlight, heart pounding. After 20 yards, the tunnel split, one branch toward the river, another toward what should have been my basement wall. The latter ended in a wooden door padlocked from the other side. I pounded on it, shouting Noah's name until my voice cracked. Then a sound, a child's muffled cry, echoed faintly from the far end. "Noah!" I splashed through the shallow water, turning the corner, and stopped. A tablet lay propped against a crate, video already playing. Adrian's face filled the screen, composed as ever. "Helena," he said, "if you're seeing this, you've proven resourceful. The boy is unharmed for now. He's very bright, you know. He deserves to learn the truth, not the version you've fed him. Meet me where your son died. Bring the key. Come alone." The screen went black. I sank onto the crate, shaking. I didn't have the brass key. Whoever sent the photo of it did, which meant I was already being watched. I staggered back up the stairs into the house. Outside, the first sirens wailed somewhere distant, indifferent to me. I locked the door behind me and tried to breathe. My phone buzzed again, another image from the same unknown number. A close-up of Noah's face, calm but weary, a hand on his shoulder just out of frame, and beneath it, one sentence: "Bring the key to St. Bridget. Midnight." The hospital again, the circle closing exactly where it began. I collapsed onto Michael's old chair, mind racing. The hidden account, the lab orders, Sloane's survival, it all converged on that place. The hospital was never just a crime scene, it was the hub. I glanced at the brass key photo still saved on Noah's laptop. Zooming in, I noticed something I'd missed before. The marble beneath it wasn't random, it bore the faint etching of the hospital's seal. The key belonged there. It had always belonged there. I packed a small bag, flashlight, notebook, revolver, the printed lab order, and slid Michael's letter into my pocket. Then I wrote a note for whoever might find the house if I didn't return. "If anything happens to me, Noah Carver is in the tunnels beneath St. Bridget Medical Center. Trust no one with a Royce connection." I left it beneath the tea tin with Marla's flash drive. Outside, Savannah lay under a bruised twilight. The cicadas had gone silent, as if the whole city were holding its breath. As I crossed the yard, I felt eyes on me. A single light burned in Adrian's window, but no silhouette moved. At the gate, something crunched beneath my shoe. I bent down. A brass key. Number 127. Cold, slick, gleaming with recent rain. And tied to it with red thread, a note written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "He's waiting. Savannah, after midnight, smells of salt and antiseptic." The streets were empty as I parked beside the hospital's shuttered east wing, the one condemned after the hurricane years ago. Rain clung to the windows like nervous sweat. I slipped the brass key into my pocket and whispered to the photograph in the glove box, Michael, smiling. "Stay with me, love. Just a little longer." Inside, St. Bridget was a mausoleum of fluorescent ghosts. The receptionist desk sat deserted, computers asleep, the air thick with disinfectant and humming lights. A single security guard dozed near the elevators. I walked past him in a nurse's jacket borrowed from Marla's trunk, head bowed, clipboard in hand. People ignore uniforms, they never ignore fear. The key fit an unmarked door behind radiology. The metal groaned, unlocking decades of silence. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. I switched on the flashlight. Dust swirled, motes floating like pale memories. Each step echoed too loud. At the bottom, the air turned damp and cold. Pipes ran along the ceiling like ribs. A faded sign read "Research Wing B restricted." The smell of chlorine mingled with something sweeter, almost medicinal. My light caught a series of steel doors, each with viewing windows fogged from within. I forced one open. The hinges screamed. Inside, an operating table, straps, and an IV stand. Glass slides labeled Sample A, B, C. A monitor still blinked a green heartbeat line, though no machine fed it. My stomach clenched. I wasn't in a hospital anymore. I was in a laboratory of ghosts. A sound made me freeze footsteps, slow, measured. I ducked behind a cabinet, pulse hammering. Adrian's voice drifted down the corridor. Calm, conversational. "You always were stubborn, Helena. I told you the soil here is soft." He carried a lantern instead of a flashlight, its glow painting him in gold. His white coat gleamed, sleeves rolled to the scar on his arm. Behind him walked another figure in a raincoat, hood drawn low. When she lifted it, silver hair spilled out. Sloane. Time collapsed. The years between her funeral and this moment vanished like smoke. She looked older, thinner, but her poise was intact, that same high-fashion precision, even underground. "Hello, mother-in-law," she said lightly. "You look remarkably well for a woman who's buried two people who inconvenienced her." I stepped out from the shadows, revolver raised. "Where is he?" Adrian smiled. "Safe. For now." Sloane's gaze flicked to the gun. "Really, Helena? Violence never suited you." "I learned from necessity." She laughed softly. "So did I. You think Michael was your sainted boy? He found out too late what this place really did. He tried to expose us, expose me." Damon panicked. "I cleaned the mess." "You murdered him." "I saved what mattered," she said. "The research, the investors, the world runs on power, not grief." Adrian touched her arm, almost tender. "Don't waste breath. She'll never understand evolution." "Evolution?" I spat. "You killed a man and call it progress." He tilted his head. "Michael's death funded a cure that will save thousands. Isn't that worth one life? You taught psychology. You know the math of morality. The moment you start counting lives, you stop being human." He sighed. "Pity." Sloane drew something from her pocket, Noah's sketchbook. "He's a beautiful boy, Helena. I used to think he'd be mine forever. Now he'll belong to history." My hands trembled. "If you hurt him," Adrian cut me off. "He's at the end of the corridor. Go. See what your protection has cost." I ran. The hall narrowed, concrete closing in. The flashlight caught another door, slightly open. Inside, Noah sat on the floor, wrists bound but unharmed, eyes wide. "Grandma?" I dropped the gun, rushing to him, cutting the cords with shaking fingers. "Are you hurt?" "No. They kept talking about Dad, about some cure." I pulled him close. "We're leaving. Now." But as we turned, the door clanged shut. The lights snapped to red. Adrian's voice boomed through the intercom. "You shouldn't have come, Helena. The air system down there is delicate. One spark could ruin years of work." Sloane's laughter followed. "He means the oxygen is unstable, so careful with that flashlight." I looked up. Vents hissed faintly, a chemical tang stinging my throat. "Gas." I grabbed Noah's hand, dragging him toward the far wall. A maintenance grate sat loose. "Help me," I whispered. Together we pried it open and crawled inside, the metal biting our knees. The tunnel angled upward toward faint daylight. Behind us, a click echoed a match. Adrian's voice serene. "Some truths must cleanse themselves." Then flame roared. Heat chased us through the duct. I shoved Noah ahead, coughing. The tunnel forked. We turned blindly, bursting into a chamber lined with water pipes. A maintenance ladder led up. I pushed him toward it. "Climb." He hesitated. "What about you?" "Go." He climbed, small hands slipping on rungs, slick with condensation. I followed, every muscle screaming. Below, fire licked the corridor, orange and furious. We reached a hatch. I slammed my shoulder against it, locked. Noah pounded from the other side. "Grandma, it won't open." "Move back." I fired once. The latch shattered. Cold night air flooded in. We crawled out onto a flat rooftop of the old wing, smoke pouring behind us. Below, fire alarms wailed, sirens answering from the street. Flames curled from the basement windows like tongues searching for confession. We collapsed against the parapet, coughing, half blinded by smoke. Noah clutched my hand. Are they dead? Through the rising heat, two figures emerged at the ground entrance, Adrian dragging Sloane, her arm bleeding, both staggering toward a black sedan. They were alive. I lifted the revolver, but they vanished into the smoke before I could aim. Firefighters swarmed the scene minutes later, pulling us to safety ladders, asking questions I couldn't answer. We spent the night under observation for smoke inhalation. Noah slept beside me, clutching my sleeve like a lifeline. At dawn, an officer entered our room. "Ma'am, the cause looks accidental. Faulty wiring in the old wing." Of course it did. In Savannah, evidence burns as easily as paper. When he left, I turned on the small hospital TV. Local news showed the blaze, then a headline scrolling beneath. Dr. Adrian Royce missing, presumed dead after fire. I stared until the letters blurred. Missing, not dead. He was too careful for endings. Noah stirred. "Grandma, can we go home?" "Soon, sweetheart." But even as I said it, I knew home was no longer safe. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw Michael's handwriting again. "Protect Noah, trust no one." The alarms in the hallway shrieked suddenly. "False trigger," the nurse said. But I knew the pattern. 3 short, 1 long. The same code that had been scrawled on the tunnel wall. Someone was still down there. Home no longer felt like home. It felt like evidence. The jasmine outside was burned at the edges from drifting sparks. The porch rail still streaked with ash. Savannah's heat had returned, but I kept my coat on it, hid the revolver. Noah hadn't spoken much since the fire. He followed me from room to room, drawing in silence. His sketches had changed. Less color, more lines, dark tunnels beneath blank houses. Children know when safety is only a word. 3 days passed before the next message arrived. A plain envelope slipped under the door while we slept. Inside, a photograph of Adrian, face half bandaged, standing beside a hospital bed. The date stamp, yesterday. Across the bottom, someone had written in red ink, "Forsyth House will burn next." I called every police contact left from Marla's files. None answered. Her death had frozen the case. I was alone again, except for the boy who trusted me to know everything. That afternoon, a car pulled up outside black sedan, tinted glass. For a breath I thought it was Adrian, come to finish what he'd started. But when the door opened, it was Sloane. She looked like the ghost of her own ambition, one arm in a sling, hair singed, designer sunglasses unable to hide the hollow behind them. She carried no purse, only a folder pressed against her chest. I met her on the porch. "You survived," I said flatly. "You sound disappointed." "I'm not surprised." She studied me. "I came because he's lost control. Adrian thinks he's the cure now. He'll destroy everything, including Noah, just to prove Michael was wrong." "Why tell me?" "Because he left me to die in that fire." Her voice cracked for the first time. "I thought I could ride his brilliance. I was wrong." She handed me the folder. "This is what Michael found, the files Damon stole before he died. They name the investors, politicians, hospitals, banks. Adrian kept copies, insurance. It's all here." I opened it. Contracts, bank transfers, photos of shipments labeled biological samples. The signatures at the bottom, Royce, Avery, Harborcrest Capital. Enough to bury them all. Sloane's hand trembled. "Take it. Just get Noah away before he comes for you." "You expect me to trust you now?" "I expect you to understand revenge." Her eyes met mine. "He'll come tonight. He likes symmetry. He started the fire where Michael died. He'll end it where he lived." I believed her. Monsters always return to the cradle of their crimes. At dusk, I sent Noah next door to the Whitlows to feed their cat. He didn't argue he saw the look in my face. Then I checked every window latch, every lock, placed the folder inside the piano bench, and loaded the revolver. For hours, nothing. At midnight, the power went out. The house exhaled, plunging into blackness. Outside, thunder muttered though the sky was clear. I moved room to room by candlelight, waiting. Then a soft knock at the back door. I raised the gun. "Who's there?" Sloane's whisper. "He's coming. Please let me in." I unlatched the door halfway and saw the shadow behind her before she did. A hand grabbed her shoulder, yanking her backward. She screamed as Adrian stepped from the dark, a pistol pressed to her ribs. "Good evening, Helena." His voice was calm, as if we were continuing an old conversation. You left me in the ashes. Not polite. You started the fire. Purification, he said simply. You can't cauterize corruption without flame. He shoved Sloane forward into the kitchen. She stumbled, clutching the table for balance. You don't have to do this, I said. Of course I do. His smile was almost tender. Michael stole my research. Then you stole my control. I'm only reclaiming balance. You murdered him. He shook his head. He volunteered. He just didn't know it. Sloane laughed bitterly. You're insane. Correction, Adrian said. I'm inevitable. He turned the gun toward me. Where's the folder? In the fire, where it belongs. He cocked the hammer. Try again. Before I could answer, Sloane lunged at him. The shot exploded, deafening in the kitchen. She fell, clutching her shoulder, gasping. I fired back. My bullet grazed his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. We both dove for it, grappling in the flickering candlelight. He was stronger, but rage gives strange strength to the old. I drove my elbow into his ribs. He grunted, staggered, then slammed me against the stove. The candle tipped, wax spilling, flame catching on a rag. Helena, he hissed. You don't understand. Your son begged me to stop her. He said she'd ruin everything. I gave him peace. I struck him with the gun butt. You gave him death. The rag flared. Fire licked the curtains. Sloane crawled toward the back door, leaving a trail of blood. Adrian lunged for her, but I fired again once, twice. He fell against the counter, eyes wide, disbelief more than pain. You can't kill an idea, he whispered, then collapsed. Smoke filled the kitchen. I dragged Sloane outside into the yard as flames devoured the house. Sirens were already distant thunder growing nearer. She clutched my arm, voice ragged. He's not dead. He never dies the first time. Her eyes fluttered. Tell Noah. Tell him his father loved him. Then she went still. I sat beside her as the fire roared higher, orange reflecting off the magnolias. My home, Michael's home, cracking, collapsing into itself. By dawn, only a skeleton remained, black against the pale sky. The firefighters found Adrian's body inside, burned beyond recognition, though I refused to look. Noah stood beside me, eyes wide, hand gripping mine. Grandma, are we safe now? I wanted to lie, to give him peace. But truth clings harder than ash. We're alive, I said. That's all safety ever means. He looked toward the ruins. What happens now? I knelt, brushing soot from his cheek. Now we finish what your father started. 2 days later, we sat in Judge Whitlow's study, the folder spread across his desk. He read in silence, the lines around his mouth deepening. These papers, he said finally, could topple half the city council. Do you realize what you've got? I realize Michael died for them. He closed the folder carefully. Then we'll see that his death means something. He handed me a small envelope. For you and for Noah. The notary delivered it this morning. It's your son's real will, sealed through my office. Inside, Michael's handwriting. If this reaches you, truth has survived longer than I did. Harborcrest's accounts hold more than money, they hold proof. Use it to give Noah freedom, not vengeance. Tell him I built a future, not a fortune. Beneath the letter, a single keycard, Cayman Bank 127. The same number etched on the brass key. Whitlow exhaled. It's offshore, beyond their reach, enough to secure Noah's life anywhere. I looked out the window at the smoldering remains of Forsyth House. And yet the past always finds us. He nodded slowly. Then burn the past yourself, Helena, before it burns you again. That night I walked alone to the edge of the river. The air smelled of smoke and salt, of endings and beginnings. I tossed the brass key into the black water. It sank without a ripple. Behind me, Noah waited on the path, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. Did you find peace? He asked. Not peace, I said. Purpose. We walked home together under the heavy Savannah moon, the ruins of the house rising like an old scar in the dark. Somewhere beyond the trees, a single owl cried warning or benediction. I couldn't tell. When we reached the porch, I saw a package on the step. Plain, damp from river mist. No return address. Inside a charred piece of metal. The remains of a cuff link. Initials still legible. A.R. Savannah always bleeds gray before dawn. The river looks like lead, heavy and secretive, the same way it did the morning they took Michael from me. I used to think time softened pain. Now I know it only teaches you where to hide it. We left the city before sunrise, Noah and I. The Whitlows had helped arrange our passage, a night ferry heading south along the coast, bound for Jacksonville. From there, we would disappear. New names, a rented cottage, a quiet life somewhere. No one asked about Harbor Crest or the dead who never stayed buried. Noah sat beside me in the truck's cab, backpack on his knees. He'd said little since the fire, though his eyes carried questions he was too kind to ask. When the lights of Savannah dwindled in the rearview mirror, he finally spoke. "Will they come after us?" "Maybe," I said, "but they'll find ashes, not answers." He nodded slowly, tracing his finger along the fogged glass. "Dad would have liked the river today. He said the water keeps secrets." "So do we," I murmured. The ferry waited under the span of the Talmadge Bridge, its deck slick with mist. Only a handful of travelers boarded truckers, a few night workers, a woman with a caged parrot. We found seats near the stern. The river lapped against steel, rhythmic as a heartbeat. When the engines rumbled to life, I let myself breathe for the first time in days. Maybe, I thought, this was what survival sounded like. Then Noah stiffened. "Grandma, look." A black sedan rolled onto the loading ramp just before it lifted. One headlight cracked, the other gleaming like an eye. A man stepped out, long coat, one sleeve pinned where a bandage should have been. Adrian, even half burned, he moved with the same impossible calm. His gaze swept the deck and found us instantly. He smiled. The ferry horn bellowed. We were already pulling from the dock, no turning back. He didn't approach right away. He waited, patient, the way predators conserve energy before the pounce. The wind rose, tossing the river into small, angry waves. Rain began thin, needling, relentless. Noah's hand slid into mine. "What do we do?" "Run if I tell you. Don't look back." Adrian crossed the deck slowly, each step measured against the roll of the ferry. "You really thought you could vanish?" he called over the wind. "Truth doesn't drown, Helena. It floats." I raised the revolver. "Stop where you are." He spread his arms. "You've killed me twice already. Do it a third time if it helps you sleep. Why follow us?" "Because unfinished experiments are untidy," he said. "The boy's blood carries Michael's mutation. He's the key to everything we lost." Noah flinched. "I'm not a lab rat." Adrian's smile was almost gentle. "No, Noah. You're a legacy." The ferry lurched as a gust hit broadside. Passengers shouted, running for cover. Adrian stepped closer. I fired. The shot ricocheted off the metal railing, sparks spraying into rain. He didn't even flinch. "You never understood," he said, advancing. "Michael's death was mercy. He begged me to save his family. I did. You injected him. I released him." The words snapped something in me. I fired again. This time the bullet tore through his shoulder. He staggered but kept coming, eyes bright with fanatic light. Noah grabbed a deck wrench from the maintenance crate and swung it with all his strength. It connected with Adrian's wrist. The gun clattered overboard. Adrian roared, shoving the boy backward. I lunged between them. The three of us collided against the guardrail, the world tilting beneath us. Rain, firelight from memory, the smell of metal and salt, it all fused into one endless moment. Then a wave struck the hull. The railing gave way. Adrian fell backward, clutching at air. For a heartbeat, his face was a white mask of disbelief. Then the river swallowed him whole. Silence. Only the storm breathing. Noah clung to me, shaking. "Is he?" "Yes," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. "The river keeps its secrets." By dawn, the ferry docked at a small marina south of the city. We disembarked with the others, faces pale, clothes soaked. The captain gave me a strange look but said nothing. To him, we were just another pair of travelers fleeing rain. We rented a car, drove inland until the ocean smell faded. At a diner outside Brunswick, I finally opened the envelope Judge Whitlow had given me, the one marked for Noah. Inside, a letter in Michael's hand. "My son, if you read this, it means your grandmother kept her promise." I couldn't stop what they built, but I could hide the cure inside the corruption. "In the account, you'll find more than money. There's data, encrypted under your name. Use it when you're ready. Heal what they tried to weaponize. Love, Dad." Noah read it twice, lips moving silently. "He wanted me to fix it. He believed you could." He looked out the window at the rising Sunday. I think I want to try. And for the first time since Michael's death, I saw hope, not the blind kind, but the hard, defiant kind that survives storms. That night, we reached a small, coastal town. I rented a cottage facing the dunes. White paint peeling, seagrass whispering in the wind. Noah fell asleep almost instantly, the exhaustion of a child who'd outrun too much darkness. I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the tide slide in. Every wave carried a fragment of memory. Michael's laugh, Sloane's smile before greed hollowed it, Marla's determined eyes, Adrian's voice whispering about evolution. I thought of all the safes and keys, the hidden files, the lies meant to protect. None of them had saved anyone. What had saved us was simpler, the stubborn, ordinary act of love. When the moon rose, I went down to the water. Something small gleamed at the tide line, half-buried metal. I knelt, heart stuttering. A cufflink, twin to the one I'd found months ago, initials almost worn away. I closed my fist around it, the surf washing cold over my hand. "Not this time," I whispered, and threw it as far as I could. It vanished into black water. Behind me, the cottage light flicked on. Noah stood in the doorway, sleepy, safe. "Come inside, Grandma. You'll catch cold." "I'm coming," I said. I took one last look at the sea. The waves closed over everything, secrets, sins, and maybe at last, the dead. Weeks later, in a quiet bank office under a false name, Noah accessed the Cayman account. The clerk slid a drive across the desk, small, innocuous. He plugged it into his laptop. Lines of code filled the screen, then blueprints, formulas, medical records, the complete documentation of Adrian's serum, every unethical trial, every falsified signature. Noah turned to me. "If I release this, people will go to prison. Maybe hospitals will change. Or maybe new monsters will take their place." He nodded. "I can't fix the world, but I can make it harder for them to hide." He typed a command. Upload initiated. On the screen, a progress bar crept forward. Slow, steady, unstoppable. When it reached 100%, he leaned back, exhaling. "Dad wanted the truth free. Now it is." I touched his shoulder. "Then we're done running." We left the bank and walked toward the pier. The air smelled of salt and freedom. Somewhere a gull cried a harsh, triumphant sound. Noah grinned suddenly, the first pure smile I'd seen in years. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we build something that lasts." He slipped his hand into mine as we stepped onto the sun-bleached boards. The sea stretched endless ahead, clean and unknowable. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Months later, an unmarked envelope arrived at the cottage. Inside was a single Polaroid. A man walking along a harbor in Lisbon, coat collar turned up against the wind. His face was shadowed, but I knew the posture, the calm, measured stride. On the back, written in faint pencil, "Evolution never ends." I burned the photo without hesitation, watching the edges curl to ash. Then I went inside, where Noah's laughter filled the rooms like music. The past had taken enough. The future, finally, was ours.